Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome aboard and welcome back. This is Gary Wilson with the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Good to have you again this week, guys. First off, a couple of admin points here. We're now being downloaded in over 50 countries, and I'd like to ask you in my best English, wherever you are, if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. It's on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, any number of channels. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. Also, some good news for you. We've been attracting a lot more real estate agents in the last several months. And these aren't your usual agents. Because I'm an investor, you're an investor, we're all investors, and we also, of course, have our own businesses we run and professions we tend to. These are agents that are trained to work with us. They literally are certified investor agents. They're not your typical agent, okay? And what's even better is we know who they are because we train them and we certified them. So they're out there. Go to the realestatewithgarywilson.com website, okay? Click on members area. In the next page, you'll see what to do. If you're already a member, on the left, you log in. If you're not, you go to the right and go in for free for 30 days and grab everything you can grab for free. Books, marketing campaigns, research tools, websites, calculators, spreadsheets. Grab all you can get and participate in our Monday night class. We call it Monday Night Live. Every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And we always have great guests on there and also great topics. So do all that. And what I was pointing to a moment ago, those investor agents are also in there. There's a community a map you can click on and see who they are and get yourself a certified investor agent. I promise you, they know how to find the properties under the radar screen, off market. They know how to analyze them, identify them, negotiate them. That's the kind of person you need on your team. So in any case, without further ado, we got a great guest today. Adam Gilbert's coming to us live. And of course, you're probably listening to us for recording, but when I recorded, he was live. And he's got an awesome background, lots of credentials. He's an investor, a real estate broker, an attorney. So what I want to do, Adam, is if you don't mind, first off, just say thank you for being here, man. I really appreciate you taking your valuable time to do this,
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I live in Palm Springs, California. It's about 118. So anything that keeps me inside is definitely worth doing right now.
Yeah. Well, I love the area. Last I was there, normally I'm there every odd number year for 6 months. This year that didn't happen because of all the restrictions. But last time I was there was March of 2019 and took the hike. If you go down south and there's an Indian reserve there.
The Indian Canyons, yeah.
It's it, man. One of the best 5-mile hikes I've ever had. Anybody going out there, you got to do it. Lots of good restaurants there in Palm Springs and some great quirky hotels too, So
definitely all for all kinds.
That's it, man. I love it. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, Adam, because of your varied experiences and background, I thought it'd be a good idea if you could paint a picture for everybody of who you are and how you got there. And then when we go into the content, maybe some case studies and things like that, you'd add a little context, little color, if you don't mind. Is that okay if we do it that way?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just give a quick background to tell you how I came on my path to where I am today. So I'm born and raised in Palm Springs, third generation resident, and I grew up here, left for school, and actually went to college and then law school and became an attorney, and always planned to just be an attorney. I moved back to Palm Springs, worked in my family's law firm, and that was it. Until 2012, I sat for the broker's exam because I could. California allowed it. And then I did my first deal on the side, and I made like a fifth of my entire paycheck in one real estate deal. And I was like, light bulb went off. There's something to this. And so from there, it was, long story short, I volunteered my time with the developer to kind of learn the entitlement process. I created a real estate company where I built it up to 11 agents. I started an AirBnB rental company, which I built up and sold. And that got me to where I am today. And I still keep my law license active, but I am president and broker of the firm Commercial. And we've got about 7 agents now. And we do commercial brokerage. And then I do a lot of my own deals. I do a lot of value add projects, buying old shopping centers that are 100% vacant, zone changes, entitlement deals, getting drive-throughs approved, anything where I think we can create some value. And also, one of our underlying themes is bettering the community through value add entitlement. That's what I do, and that's what I have fun doing every day. Awesome.
Well, I appreciate that. And you mentioned value add a couple times. Good keywords. Yeah, that's it, man. That's what we do. We buy whatever the current situation is. We make it better, and then we either resell it or keep it and refi it. But you also mentioned zoning, which is really interesting because I know we talked about this ahead of time. I just was a witness at a zoning hearing outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And there were two hearings. The first one was online. It was disastrous. Nobody was prepared. The zoning board wasn't real clear on how to actually run the thing online. And it was just a chaotic. And so we had to do it again. And they had to finally meet in person. So I came up from Florida to be part of the hearing because ironically, it was a neighborhood that I used to invest in. And my children live around there. They're grown adults now. But so some of the people knew me, and I was able to have some influence over the decision. But what's interesting is we are definitely doing a value add with a particular property. I wanted to see if you wouldn't mind touching on that. How can you actually use zoning to create value?
Yeah, definitely. And so, a lot of people, zoning has a really important role in both society and city planning, right? There's a reason why we don't want an auto shop right next to someone's residential home because you don't want fumes, you don't want businesses interacting. And there's a reason why the homes that are near industrial areas tend to be lower value than residential areas that are outside. However, as cities change and mature, things change. And so, if high-end residential is coming and the land is now much more valuable as high-end residential, and you have this old industrial area that's of a low value, that is probably something that for the betterment of the city and the betterment of the values and highest and best use of a particular land in any city, we should change. And the zoning codes in cities typically don't change as fast as the free market. And so what that leads to are opportunities for us to identify and acquire properties, change the zoning to the better and higher use, and create value both for ourselves as investors and for the community itself.
Awesome. Yeah, you're exactly. Yeah. In the early days when I was first investing, to me, it was a nuisance. I'm like, wait a second, it's like an old neighborhood, for example, in an old city that's going through gentrification. And I'm thinking, well, I want to do this with the property because I believe it's the highest and best use. And yet the powers that be were like, well, no, this is the zoning we have to work with. So any tips and pointers you can give to people, like how can you actually structure your presentation, or how should you present your case so that you get the zoning that you want? And there, because I've been through several of them before, and most of them did well, but one or two I was totally blindsided and surprised. Not prepared.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say one is definitely speak to the community beforehand. Before you invest your time and money, the community leaders and elected officials and planning staff, they kind of know what's going on in the area, and they know what the citizens have an appetite for and what they want to see within their city. So you can get a lot of information beforehand. And then also the secondary thing would be and this is where like bettering of the community, make sure it's a use that won't just make you more money, but will also be right for the community. Because to ask a city to change zoning of a particular area, it's a big ask. You have to go through a very long process. You have to spend a lot of money. You have to do environmental reviews, typically, at least here in California. And in doing that, you're asking the city to change what it has on the books for everyone else. And so make sure that it is the right use for the area that will better not only your property, but the surrounding properties around it.
Yeah, I agree. This is so relevant too, because I know in the last generation, we've had some new categories in the industry, in the real estate industry, that popped up, like Airbnb, for example. And yet some of the old terminology, it goes back 100 years, like the term boarding house. Boarding house back then meant something different. Like today, when we talk about Airbnb, it's really not a boarding house. There's theme-based Airbnb. There's there's business type Airbnb, there's destination type Airbnb, and some kind of combined. And I'm just using the example of Airbnb. There's also short-term, what we call corporate housing for temporary, like traveling nurses, for example, or corporate executives that do a 6-month gig in another town. So they don't want to be in a hotel for 6 months. They want to be in a neighborhood, But when you say boarding house, people are like, oh, we can't have that thing around there where we live. Our kids are around there, But it fortunately sometimes it's the only term you have to use, So
definitely,
yeah.
And just on that Airbnb note, because it's a huge issue here in Palm Springs, because we're a huge Airbnb market, and I have experience. And so what a lot of the neighborhoods were saying, and the people who were against it were like, we don't want hotels in our neighborhoods. We don't want, like if you want to do a hotel, make it commercial zoning. Well, I'll give you a little secret of what I'm doing now, because we now have a very strong vacation rental ordinance in Palm Springs that limits the amount of contracts you could do and limits the income that you can make. I'm buying boutique hotels and turning them into Airbnbs, and 9-bedroom Airbnbs. And so they're commercially zoned, so I'm not subject to the ordinance, and it fits within the zoning of what is allowed. But you just take a different product type and put it into the platform, and now you're allowed to do it. So it's a good option if you can think outside the box a bit.
Yeah. And hold on a second. Did you say California wants to limit how much money you can make as an investor? I'm flabbergasted.
We're still able to scratch out a living, so don't worry about it.
It's obviously, and everybody listening, I'm out there quite a bit. I've got family in California and friends. I'm usually there 6 months every 2 years, for January through June. This year being an exception, of course. But I can tell you, California isn't just one type of location. You got LA and San Francisco and San Diego, 3 completely different types of cities. But aside from that, you've got Inland Empire, you've got Central Valley, you've got the Yosemite and Lake Tahoe, you got Northern California up in Anderson and all that, and you've got the beautiful Monterey Coast. I mean, it's so diverse, and there's so much opportunity there, and so many wonderful people. So don't let one thing steer you away. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in California. I'm telling you, we're out there. Palmdale is another great area to invest in. Of course, you got all up in there. Bakersfield up to Fresno, and it's just an amazing place to operate in. And I know the government sometimes will scare you with the things they want to do, but believe me, I know plenty of people out there that make plenty of money. Speaking of making money, let's get back here. So when it comes to structuring the deals, like you talked about, you picked up a few boutique hotels that were already zoned properly for commercial, turn them into Airbnb. How do you actually structure deals to give you the most flexibility like that? I mean, that was pretty creative,
Yeah, definitely. And so, the benefit that I saw there was because I knew the Airbnb rental market, these people were operating these boutique hotels as hotels. So that's daily maid service, that is having a manager on site, that's booking it on hotel sites. And I knew if you're renting out 1 bedrooms for $125 a night, if you rented out the whole thing as a 9-bedroom, you could rent it out for $2,500 a night on Airbnb. Right. And so if you're buying the property on the principles of how other people are looking at it and valuating and giving it a valuation based on a hotel model, and you could put it in a different model and double, if not triple the income, then that's how you make money. And so I'm going to do that for 2 years, and then I'm going to refinance it based on the cash flow that I've created under this model. And it will be worth, or at least I'll be able to finance it for much more than I paid. And so that's the model of that one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I like that. There's probably a million examples we can come up with. But one thing I like to do when I invest is I use this big picture formula. What I call it, upside potential versus downside risk. And I weigh it out. And what I look for, obviously, is the upside potential is much greater than the downside risk. And sometimes it's a fluid thing. And it also is fluid because everybody's different. We call our risk threshold is different. The risk tolerance is different. So what do you suggest to people when it comes to structuring deals, balancing risk tolerance versus, protecting the investor in the deal,
Definitely. And I think the most important thing is know yourself. If you have a very low risk tolerance, like do not get into the game of high risk ventures. You will be ripping your head out. You won't be able to sleep. I mean, I've got a pretty high risk tolerance, and I've had my sleepless nights with some deals because it's nerve wracking. You're investing a lot of money and putting a lot on the line to do stuff. So first one is know yourself. Second would be just like you said, in balancing that risk tolerance and the risk and the downside. I always say I look at hundreds of deals and I try to really find the best one that is actually going to have the best chance of going with that upside. And I always equate it to playing poker. If I've got two kings, I've got a pretty good chance of winning. Can I still lose? Of course, but I'm making the bet. So if I've done my research, I've done my due diligence, I've talked with the right people, and I say, hey, I've got an 85% chance to get 10x on this deal, I'm going to do it. But it's really doing your homework. You can't just guess. You got to put it down. You got to talk with experts or become an expert yourself.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about geography. I know you're in one of the most beautiful places in the world, Palm Springs.
Parts of the year.
There you go. Yeah. But the kind of things we're talking about, can we do this everywhere? And I'll kind of paint a picture for you. There were several years where I traveled literally definitely weekly and often daily, And so I started getting into staying outside of the traditional hotel establishments and going into people's bed and breakfasts and private homes through Airbnb and things like that. And what I found out was, man, it's everywhere. You can get Airbnb in downtown Detroit. Just because it's not a beach or a famous vacation spot doesn't mean you can't have Airbnb. But what would you say to people, or how can the listeners are all over, mostly U.S., but a lot in Canada and different countries. But people who live in Chicago and Detroit and, Columbia, South Carolina, and all these other places that are, they're not by a beach or not by a resort area. And maybe they're not even by a big business community like Atlanta or New York or Chicago. But sorry, I'm kind of rambling here. But when it comes to geography, what can we tell our listeners about investing where they are in their communities? Maybe they're in, Lincoln, Nebraska,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so I would say the biggest thing is know who your customer is and know your traveler. And so I think it's just going to increase in the future. Airbnb has become, synonymous with that type of travel. It's like Kleenex, that's the tissue paper. And so people will be doing more Airbnb in the future. I think it's only a growing industry, and people are kind of sick of hotels. To some degree, the resort charges, the parking, all those kind of like tacked on fees. And there's tacked on fees on vacation rentals as well. But if I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, I would figure out if someone's going to stay in an Airbnb, what are they staying here for? If they're coming to Palm Springs, I know they're coming because they want a vacation. And so I need a pool and I need, really nice furnishings because it's luxurious vacationing. If it's in Lincoln, Nebraska, and they're coming because the convention center is right there and they're coming to conferences, well, guess what? I'm building them an awesome workstation. And I'm talking about all the things that they're going to want for that specific use. So figure out who your customer is and then design the space around them, and you'll probably do pretty well.
Yeah. I know there are areas, by the way, that are easier than others. In other words, like a place like Orlando, Florida is a business location and a destination location. You've got business travelers there and you got destination travelers there. So if you can have both of those types of communities, I think you can often do quite well versus an area that's just going to be one directional. Maybe it's just for destination travelers or just for business travelers. I'm not saying you can't do well. It just seems to me like an area that has both things to offer. You can appeal to both types of audiences,
100%. And for example, in Palm Springs, it's a huge bachelorette destination right now. All the bachelorette parties are coming down to Palm Springs. And I never did this, so someone could take this and steal this idea. I always wanted to design a bachelorette house. And so you have everything's pink and like really exciting. And there's 9 makeup stations so that all the girls can do their makeup at one time and they're not sharing it. And everything's got a hairdryer. So, you call it the bachelorette house, and I guarantee you will get a high rent and like little 0 to no vacancy on that home.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably a pool and a bar would help too.
Yes, exactly. A couple other factors in there.
Here you go. Well, let's talk a little bit about timing. I mean, this is such a strange economy because even without the virus and the government stimulus and things like that, if you just look at what's happened in housing in this latest recovery, which is now going on 10 years, and this is my fifth economic cycle. Even in the last one leading up to the drop, it wasn't as crazy as it is now. It was crazy then, but this is even crazier. People are waiving contingencies. They're outbidding each other, just absolutely in what we call it silly money. So the thing is, the last recession, we thought we were ready for a correction for several years. It took about 5 years before it finally actually happened. And now we got this other factor where the government's actually literally printing and handing out money like it's monopoly money. Yeah. And nobody really knows what the long-term effect is because the US dollar is essentially the world's reserve, number one. And number two is the government gets to borrow it at zero or next to zero. So they just feel like they've got the license. Let's just keep printing it, put it out there. Well, I knew long-term, the fundamentals of supply and demand, basic economics is gonna kick in. So in any case, I don't want to. But by the way, everybody listening, I'm one of the most positive people you ever meet. I'm also a realist, and I've learned from the past when people start getting silly with their money, it's maybe time to start. It's like Warren Buffett says, when people are afraid, it's time to take action. When everybody's taking action, it's time to be afraid. So it's
one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah. So given where we are, is there any particular sector in the real estate industry that you can see people focusing on, or what are maybe some words of wisdom or some suggestions there, if you don't mind, relative to timing, where we are in this cycle? So.
Yeah, it's definitely, and what my mentor always said, Adam, don't buy buildings until there's blood in the streets. Like you want to just save your cash and wait till blood's in the streets and pick things up for pennies. But at the same time, there's other factors that you have to think about. If there is massive inflation that occurs as a result of all this printing money, one of the greatest hedges against inflation is real estate. Because if you have a building and you buy it for $3 million and now the dollar's worth it, guess what? Now it's worth $5 million, just because we have massive inflation. And so it's a hedge in that way. But one of the things that I've always done, especially because the market's been going up steadily since 2011 now, so 10 years, is to try to find areas that people are bearish on and find opportunities there. So post-COVID, everyone's like, office is dead. No one's going to go to the office anymore. Everyone's going to work from home. Well, guess what? In 2 years, everyone's going to be sick of it. And they're all going to go back to the office. And so, but there's good deals on office buildings right now because everyone won't touch it. So I'm buying an office building. And because that's where the deals are. And would I buy a resident, my dream home right now? Probably not, because I think the residential market is a little too frothy, and I think people are getting stupid with their money. But always kind of go against the grain and follow Warren Buffett's advice. When people are getting greedy, get scared.
Yeah, I love it. Well, listen to this. I know we're getting close on time, but there's a couple more things I want to go over. So. We talked about, geography, and then we talked about timing, but a lot of it really has to do with our mindset. And I know over the years, I'm more conservative now in how I invest. I used to invest strictly for cash flow. Now I invest more for long-term capital appreciation. And a lot of people do that as you age. Your philosophy tends to evolve. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just where are you in your life and where are you geographically and where are you in the economy. But what I'm getting at here is the mindset. I mean, how do you actually build and sustain the entrepreneur's mindset that you need? Because it's critical. Every investor by definition is an entrepreneur. And I own multiple businesses as well as investments, but it's the same mindset. And I wish I could tell people, here's this bottle of stuff, you take a pill every day and you get the right mindset, but that's not realistic. So I'm always interested in hearing people's opinions on that. What would you say, or what's worked for you, So. Yeah.
And I've had this challenge, right? Because, I talk with my friends and I'm like, so why don't you start your own business? Why don't you do this? Like you can blah, 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 and be an entrepreneur. And it's that level of ambition and that level of work ethic. It is not for everyone. And I have friends who, they make $50,000 a year and they drink the beer on the weekends and watch football with their friends, and they are way happier than I am. And that is okay. I'm stressed out all the time, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And so kind of like back to that risk tolerance is know yourself. If you can't make the leap and get out of your 9-to-5 job, don't do it because you probably would have done it already. And so just know yourself. And for me, I know that I'm ambitious. If I made $1 billion, if I won the lottery, I'd still do deals because it's fun for me. And that's just how I live my life. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got a feeling a lot of people would be interested in speaking with you because we haven't even discussed everything. I mean, the fact is you're an attorney, you're a broker, you're a developer, of course, you're an investor. And I know for me, my lifelong attorney, unfortunately passed away last November. We've been with him for 24 years, and he was, getting up there in years. And so I really miss him. We became really good friends. But I tell you what, having that resource, I mean, being able to pick up the phone and call him, it was amazing. I really missed that. There was one time I was driving 7 hours, and he knew I was driving. And it was one of those times in life where, it's like, things were not going my way, to put it mildly. And he called me up, and we talked for 3 hours. We talked about Abraham Lincoln, and he was a big history. He was also belonged to the Italian club and spoke fluent Italian, even though he was an English, Irish, Scottish guy. So it was really interesting. And but it was nice to have that sort of a friend and with that valuable resource and that of knowledge. So if people want to talk to you, is there a way for people to get a hold of you? I mean, a website, email, a chapter in a book, or a free consultation, or I think you're going to get a lot of takers here. So be careful what you say. But I know that people are going to ask me when we get comments on these things all the time, and I'd like to be able to say, yep, here's go to the website or whatever it is,
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's actually really interesting because I always put out there, like with my network on Facebook, I'm like, hey, like I've got a couple hours, like I'm going to set office hours. Call me if you have questions on anything, starting a business or doing anything. No one ever freaking calls. I think they're scared to take your time, even when I put it out there, or they're just, there's a hesitancy. So please reach out to me. I'm on all pretty much social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Adam Gilbert 13. Adam Gilbert, Gilbert 13. You could also find my firm, thefirmcommercial.com, or you can go to my personal website, adamgilbertesq.com. Reach out to me anywhere, and I even have my cell phone number on there if you want to call or text.
Okay, so that's thefirmcommercial.com, Adam Gilbert 13, and Adam Gilbert ESQ for Esquire.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's awesome. I tell you what. If somebody was to reach out to you that wanted to work with you, what does that process look like? Is it like an initial 3-minute conversation followed by a half-hour interview, and then what's that process look like?
Yeah. So it really depends on what the role would be, and so I pretty much serve 3 separate roles. Out here in Palm Springs, I still work as a broker every day. It keeps the money coming in so that I can fund deals. You got to make money to do your deals. And so I represent people in finding vacation rental assets, specifically on the residential side in Palm Springs, and then pretty much all asset classes of commercial property, from industrial, multifamily, retail, office, pretty much anything. So there's that portion of it. And then I also will fund my investments. And so we'll do general syndications. So if you've got a IRA or a 401k that you want to direct towards real estate investment, or you just have some extra capital that you want to diversify, we could talk about some existing projects that I have going on. And then the final thing would be just general consultation for entitlements. I usually just charge a lawyer fee, $300 an hour, and I'll give you advice as to how to structure your entitlement deals and get them through your various cities.
Okay.
Mostly in California, though.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. I appreciate you being open like that. And for everybody listening, I tell you what, if you have not been to Palm Springs, I highly encourage you to go visit there, particularly when it's in the middle of the winter. I've been there in March before, and it was mid-80s, perfectly sunny, and just amazing. Great restaurants, lots of little small shops and art galleries, and some unique, eclectic boutique motels, and you're only 2 hours from LA. In fact, originally, guys, a lot of the Hollywood folks who go out there, a lot of the executives, that's where they went to get away, So it has a sort of flair and flavor, yet it's pretty conservative too, So
yeah, there's a lot of old Hollywood there, because in their Hollywood contracts, they had to stay within 100 miles of the studio, which is Palm Springs. And so everyone, had their place in Palm Springs, and you still see all of the, the Lucille Ball house, Elvis Presley house, the Frank Sinatra house, the Bob Hope house, lots of really cool real estate and architecture.
It is. Yeah, and you can walk everywhere,
Yeah.
It's amazing. And there's no traffic. I mean, you go back to LA, you might as well just plan on, taking a nap on the 5 or the 405, or it's just one big giant plate of spaghetti anymore, So,
definitely. If you come to Palm Springs, if you wake up early enough, you could do the California special, which is you wake up in the desert and have a drink by the pool. You drive up to Big Bear 2 hours and go snowboarding, and then you drive down to the beach in another 2 hours, and you can go surfing. So that's the amazing part of California. Yeah,
I agree. So, okay, everybody, I appreciate you participating. Again, if you haven't done so, go to the website, realestatewithgarywilson.com. Click on members area, and if you remember, you know what to do. If you're not, go to the right-hand side, get in for free, grab all the material you can get. It's like Santa Claus wrecked his sled right in front of your house, and all the goodies are there. You don't have to pay a dime for it, okay? Books, training material, marketing campaigns, research tools, analysis tools, and more importantly, get yourself one of those investor agents. That one critical team member will help make you or break you more than almost any other. And then while you're at it, go check out Adam too, by the way. Remember this, thefirmcommercial.com, Adam Gilbert ESQ, and Adam Gilbert 13. And Adam, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say from the bottom of my heart, thanks for being here again, taking your valuable time. And I'll have you on again another time too. We'll go into some more things like syndications, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I love to. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Okay, everybody take care. God bless you and your families. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.